Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove. I'm joined by a man who just watched USA versus Venezuela with me, and he's got some thoughts. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello, I do indeed, and I can tell that you do too because the level of joy dictates how happy you are. That was only a slightly happy introduction, which means that you are miserable.
It's a less enthusiastic hello and welcome than people are used to.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Well,
and justifiably so.
Did I mention that I just watched USA Venezuela?
Yikes.
So we're going to do this, right? Mm-hmm. So USA lost 3-0 to
Yep.
Venezuela in the final Gold Cup warm-up game, if that's really what it was. I even have questions about that.
As do I.
Rather than just complaining, which I know it's very tempting to do, we've kind of done that off air, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to try and analyse what went wrong.
Yes.
And we're going to think about how could it be fixed.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the extent that we can, that is the case. Yeah. I'll just say, basically, I've done shows before where it was not with you. It was after negative results, and it was me and another person, and it ended up just being kind of ranty. No one wants to hear two people just complain for the entire game, because that's why you have Arsenal Fan TV. You don't need us to do that.
Well, if you are looking for rants, think of this as a more focused kind of rant with a point.
There'll be some rants in there, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get mad.
All right, so 3-0 to Venezuela, all the goals in the first half. I mean, let's start with what went wrong. Any sort of major, tactical or personnel type things?
I mean, nothing that jumped off the page aside from, I guess I'm starting off very negative by saying that, aside from that it wasn't a very inspiring lineup, that this was kind of what we thought it would be given injuries and trying to kind of rotate some players. But you and I both looked at this and we were like, well, okay, but we're missing, and then we listed 4 players who will probably end up as starters.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of first-choice players in this team.
If we're going to do Gold Cup starters, I think you would add, obviously, Pulisic, you would have Tyler Adams, you would add Michael Bradley, and Josie Altidore would start. And apart from that, this is basically the lineup, right? So 7 of 11 feels like mostly the lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so seeing that and kind of knowing that, when you look at the, say, attacking subs that we did have coming off the bench.
Yeah, Morris and Holmes came off the bench.
Yeah, Morris and Holmes. And then Altidore was on the bench. He could come on. It didn't feel like a team that was necessarily... It didn't make me excited to watch. I wasn't like, this is going to be fun. It was more of a okay, I'll watch this because we need to know what's going on.
But let's think of it this way, right?
Sure.
Only 4 starters missing to our calculations. Right. I think the problems were with the system and the way that Greg Berhalter wants this team to play, which I've mostly been in favour of until I saw it come up against this Venezuela team playing a 4-5-1 that made it difficult, and then we didn't adapt at all. Yeah. So I think I want to dig into the tactical thing of why the Greg Berhalter 4-3-3 did not work against Venezuela.
All right, and we talked about this during the game because I didn't quite understand what you were getting at.
Neither did I, to be honest. It started as a complaint, and I think you kept essentially interrogating me until you made me say something that made sense.
Well, no, it was more like because you were technically right. Basically, you were just saying that it feels like we have a lot of possession, but we're not. Is that what we're going for?
Yeah.
And we kind of kept watching and kept kind of fine tuning it until I think you're correct that basically it was possession, but not necessarily the type of possession we wanted. So when we did have the ball, there wasn't really anything done with it.
Yep.
But I don't think that was the intent, obviously. I don't think it was just to keep the ball and frustrate Venezuela. Certainly that wasn't the case.
No,
when you're 3-0 down.
It's supposed to be to open them up.
Exactly.
Right?
And that was the problem.
And here's the big thing. I think both of us on first watch were very critical, of Will Trapp.
Yep.
I think you even tweeted something I said about Will Trapp is the man to pass the ball back to the centre-backs.
He is.
I mean, I still think it's part of the problem that maybe Will Trapp isn't necessarily a very adventurous or risk-taking passer. But I also think when we rewatched, we saw that he did not have many options, and that's not his fault.
This is maybe going to be whatever. I don't care. I think a lot of both of these friendlies have been about seeing the limitations of the current U.S. national team right now.
The system or the players?
Yes. And I think
I should have expected that.
And maybe. But that's what it has been here is yes, you're absolutely right. That rewatching again, a lot of this is not on Will Trapp to the degree that we thought it was.
Yeah.
But it is still
it just
on
looks
him.
Like it is.
But it is still on him a little bit. That if you want to be a national team captain playing at international level, you've got to be able to command your midfield to change. You've got to take that leadership. You've got to kind of take a more proactive role. And instead, this is the second game in a row where I feel like because it hasn't quite worked, he's shrunk from the occasion rather than risen to it.
Okay, so before we get into Will Trapp and the other midfielders, let's actually diagnose the problem that we saw.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So as we said, Venezuela have a 4-5-1.
Yep.
That's how they're set up. 3 defensive central midfielders, essentially, right? It's Herrera, Rincon, Moreno. We would have Will Trapp come deep, take the ball off of the centre-backs, and then the 2 midfielders ahead of him, the 2 number 10s, as Berhalter likes to call them, McKennie and Roldan, would position themselves behind the defensive five, right? So the other side of the five. So it's literally Will Trapp with the ball, then 5 midfielders spread across in front of him, and 2 US players, 2 number 10s, hoping to receive the ball.
Yes.
That math doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
It does not work at all, right? So what we needed is McKennie to come deep and literally come behind that line and come and show for the ball, or Roldan to come deep and come and show for that ball. But instead, they both stayed high, like just underneath Zardes, right? So they blocked themselves off.
Yeah, to the extent that, as a conversation we've had before, when players do a thing every single time, to me that means that's what they've been told to do.
Yes, I think that's definitely what they've been told to do.
And I think maybe the idea is pull some of those central midfielders back or pull some of the defenders up because they get nervous about having kind of attackers in empty space, and so that leaves either space in behind for attackers to run onto, and the United States did go for long balls, or it makes the midfield drop in, and then you have a little bit more time to advance the ball up the field. Instead, Venezuela mostly kept that line, and it seemed like the United States attackers, McKennie and Roldan, would both instead kind of take the mindset of, okay, I've gotten into the space where I'm supposed to be, now I'm here.
Here's my problem with it. I think I did what Greg told me to do, or Coach Greg told me to do, and that should be enough. But instead, I think it should be more problem-solving of, okay, Trapp can't break this line. I need to go back and show for him.
And why this makes me, without going down the pathway of a rant, but why I find this so disheartening is because if we are going to play a more progressive, attacking, possession-based soccer that causes problems for defenses, you want to see progression. You want to see from game to game, okay, this didn't work last game. How have they addressed it? Oh, okay, they've made it. And in this game, more so than any other game we've seen in the Berhalter era, admittedly a brief tenure, but still, like, it was so much more static, and you and I would pause it and be like, okay, if this is a better possession team, there's much more rotation, there's much more movement, and this pass goes here, that player goes there, this player goes there, and now they've got 2 players wide open. Yeah. And instead, it would be, when we'd hit play, the players would kind of stand there and wait for somebody else to move, and what ends up happening, to connect it back to the initial point, is then Will Trapp doesn't have any passes, so he turns and plays it back to a center back and tries to get the ball back again.
So Longo Miazga gets it, and then they give it back to him, and then Trapp looks up and repeat and repeat and repeat.
Yeah.
Here's another problem I have with this is we've talked a lot under the Greg Berhalter era about the right back role, the Nick Lima role or the Tyler Adams role, where you start at right back, when the team has possession, you come and be an extra central midfielder. Nick Lima didn't do that today. I assume that was the instruction from Greg Berhalter. He instead went wide. Yep. And I think it needed to happen in this game because Trapp would have had another midfielder to pass to start unbalancing Venezuela a bit, right? Rather than him facing 3 central midfielders and trying to get passes through. Or a line of 5 across.
Yes, it didn't happen to the extent that it made me wonder if maybe after the Jamaica game he thought, okay, that is no longer going to be our secondary approach.
Yeah,
instead,
it will be.
Instead, it will just be a conventional 2 fullbacks who get forward intermittently.
And he did, right? Lima did get forward and get a lot of crosses in. I think that was one of the useful avenues of attack, but none of them resulted in goals. And I think it also reminds you that you can't have both things.
No.
You can't have an overlapping fullback and have the right back be the extra central midfielder. So you've got to sacrifice one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. And then that necessitates other changes. So you can't then have just Will Trapp standing on the ball looking for passes. It means he's probably got to give it to a center back. He's probably got to get more involved. The center backs have to take more ownership of possession and move forward with it and create situations in which Venezuela feel uncomfortable, because once they're uncomfortable, they adjust what they're doing.
Zimmerman did it once, I want to say.
Yes, I think so. But for the most part, I think maybe Miazga did it in the beginning, but inevitably what they would look for was long diagonals or long balls over the top instead of kind of line-splitting balls, to the extent that there were moments when Miazga in the first half especially, he had a couple times when Tyler Boyd did drop into space, was kind of there, but it would have required splitting 2 defenders in maybe like a 5-yard gap. And you could just see that Miazga didn't want to do that. He didn't want to take that risk.
It's risky, right?
And what
because possession is like the prized thing.
Yep.
And possession often means if you're only thinking possession, then you're thinking about the safe ball.
Exactly.
And the safe ball ends up going backwards and backwards and backwards.
And that was the other kind of major problem, I think. It wasn't just a lack
That's
of
how we
movement
get the first
rotation.
Goal.
Yes. I mean, how Venezuela get the first goal.
Right.
Yes.
But isn't it that we end up getting forced backwards and backwards and backwards because we're making safe pass after safe pass after safe pass?
Yeah.
Do you want to get to this right now?
Well, no, I just wanted to say that, but I think that was, I just wanted to put I guess an exclamation point on the end, is that, instead of making some of those risky passes and splitting the lines and making Venezuela uncomfortable, It was, I'm going to play it back to another center back. And you contrast that with what Venezuela did, and a couple of their goals come from, let's play the ball through, let's dribble a little bit out of pressure, and then play fast passes and see what happens.
Oh, okay.
But yes, now let's get to the Venezuela goals.
Okay, so the very first goal, it's the Zach Steffen mistake, right? But before we get to that, which is definitely worth talking about, it starts with the US have possession, and it's Will Trapp.
Yep.
And maybe if McKennie had come and shown a little bit more, or if Trapp had taken an extra touch out of pressure, we could have progressed that ball through central midfield. Instead, he goes back to Matt Miazga. Matt Miazga then, under a bit of pressure, doesn't want to take on anybody and goes back to Zach Steffen.
Yes.
That's how we end up with Zach Steffen with the ball at his feet, basically on his goal line.
Yes. And I want to pause there to go back to Trapp having that ball, because this is where I say, like, Weston McKennie could have dropped in like 2 yards, not 10 yards, 2 yards closer to his own goal, and maybe just shouted a little bit louder for that ball. And I think
open
Trapp,
the angle up and demand the ball.
And I think Trapp plays that ball. And then now the United States have played out of pressure. Venezuela have committed numbers forward, so now you've like bypassed 4 or 5 players right there, and you can turn and go. So that
instead of bypassing, we backpass.
Exactly. But I think so. That's McKennie not showing and not being aggressive enough in his movement to show. But it's also Will Trapp, who I think a better central midfielder controls that, tries to take a little bit of touch to pull the defender in, and then like play a reverse pass.
To give a very extreme example, I watched England-Netherlands in the Nations League semi-final.
Yeah.
Frankie de Jong is like the primo version of what we want Will Trapp to be, right? A passing number 6 who can make things happen. He would have dribbled out of pressure and found a pass.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then made himself available for the return pass. It's not fair because Will Trapp is not Frankie de Jong, but I'm worried that they're almost on two ends of the spectrum, as opposed to like Trapp being in the middle of the spectrum and de Jong being on the extra good side.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's fair. But I think it's also like we had a vague military analogy you and I did about like going over the trench. Sort of.
Yeah.
But like it applies here that like if you're waiting and waiting and waiting and you're always playing it safe, you have to have aggressiveness of action at some point. And if it's Trapp saying, I don't really want to make that like that kind of risky pass into the middle, even though it's not really that risky at all because there's tons of space, I'll drop it back to Miazga. Miazga now thinks, I don't want to take a risk either, even though that ball is still maybe on. It's slightly less on than it was with Trapp, so I'll drop it back further. And now it goes back to Zach Steffen. This does not let him off the hook at all.
No, we'll get to that in a second.
But you can see how the safe pass, every time, it makes it harder and harder to play what was an easy ball to begin with.
I think when you make the safe pass, it's like you're passing on responsibility.
Exactly.
And then there's more pressure on the next person and more pressure on the next person.
Exactly.
Until you end up with Zach Steffen with the ball at his feet. However, when Zach Steffen has the ball at his feet, he should have just launched it clear or played it wide. I think what he tried to do, you spotted this, he is looking for Weston McKennie, right? And he's trying to play it down an alley that's made up of like 3 Venezuelan players to the left and right. He's trying to play it right down the middle, but he also needs to put a bit of bend on it to get around them and get it to McKennie. And he just underhits it, mishits it. It does not go to Weston McKennie.
And in a somewhat damning statement, I would say that this pass, like the 2 players that he tries to split, is a tighter gap than what Miazga earlier had said. Nah, I don't really want to play that down.
So that's it. They forced that pressure on Steffen a little bit, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I understand what Steffen is looking for. I think Alexi Lalas made the point that like if you want a team that's going to play possession and build out of the back, you're going to run into these issues. At least I believe that's the point he was making. And I would disagree with that to some extent because, yes, if you do want to do that, you maybe take some risks, but it also doesn't mean
crazy risks.
You don't have to have a devotion to like unless it's Pep Guardiola there who's going to make you run for 10 miles. If you don't do it, you can kick that ball long.
Also, Pep Guardiola gets to work with his goalkeeper and team week in, week out, every day on this stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Greg Berhalter does not have that advantage of time with the US men's national team.
Yes.
All right, so to quickly talk through this goal, as Steffen tries to play it to McKennie, it's picked off by our old friend Yangel Herrera.
Yep.
Herrera makes a very clever pass into Severino, who's like up on Steffen.
Yeah.
Severino lays it off, and then Solomon Rondon is able to finish. Greg Berhalter said at half-time this goal was offside, and he was right.
He was right.
Yeah. Severino's offside.
He definitely is. All I can figure is that when the ball goes back to Steffen, Miazga and Aaron Long, the 2 center backs, spread wide the way you would in this type of system so that you can be outlets.
Yeah.
Long certainly doesn't drop back far enough to keep
Severino
onside.
Yeah, we double checked, right?
So all I can figure is that maybe what he does do is, and this isn't his fault if it's the case, but all I can figure is that he does do is maybe drop into a point where the AR can't see it as clearly, and so it looks like, oh yeah, they're level when that ball is played, even though they're definitely not.
Yeah, I mean VAR, we would have got this call back, I think, but we went into this knowing there's no VAR, and we went into this knowing that your goalkeeper can't pass straight to midfielders. So yes, it was offside. It does not excuse what happened.
It does not. And the other thing that's very telling, I would say, about the current state of this national team, and it's not a thing that I've ever really, really put too much stake in, but maybe that's because I thought it was just kind of there, is heart and effort. And I'm not saying that, like, the United States got to show some heart and they just got to run around, but it's slightly damning to me that no one calls for offside on this. All the players are just heads down, kind of blaming each other. Stefan runs out and kind of yells at McKennie.
We'd have been screaming for offside.
Yeah, and only because one person for the third goal, I believe it is, where they're offside again. It's Rondon offside.
Yeah.
Only Tim Ream angrily calls for offside. And everybody else again looks dejected. And it's just that sort of the lack of fight, the lack of spirit, the lack of intensity that I think we've come to expect from the U.S. national team years ago, I think in the last 2 years, has slightly fallen off.
Can we focus on Stefan for a second?
Sure.
This is the second time in 2 games, right? This happened against Jamaica, but we got away with it. Does this worry you going into the Gold Cup?
100%.
Like, I see this as a thing that could happen during the Gold Cup.
Yeah, I mean, one time is a fluke. 2 times might be like precedent. I don't know.
Shame on you, right?
Yes,
Fool
exactly.
me twice, shame on you.
Yeah, don't get shamed.
Fool me 3 times and we've lost to Guyana.
Don't get shamed again, or fooled again, or something like that. I think, to quote our next president. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a worrying thing because it's Stefan either being too confident or too erratic in his decision-making, and I'm not sure which is worse.
I love a goalkeeper to pass out of the back, but you've got to know when it's a risk worth taking and when it's an impossible pass. The one against Jamaica, I can't remember who the Jamaican player was, but he was like right in his face. The pass was just not on at all.
No.
I would know not to make that pass.
Yes, I think you definitely would, for sure. I'm not sure I would, but you definitely would. But also the way he comes out, and yells at McKennie, we went back and watched thinking like, okay, there must be something. And yes, maybe he can move a little bit more. Maybe he can, but it's not this like he's just standing there looking away or like it's not that on.
Yeah.
And even if it were,
it's not on at all.
Even if it were, it's worth noting he doesn't split the 2 defenders the way he needed to. It goes straight to a Venezuelan player.
Herrera.
Who plays it first time. It's not like Herrera takes a touch and McKennie could have made a defensive play. So to me, it just feels like Stefan very angry in the moment, but also sort of like, I've made a mistake and this needs to not be my fault.
All right, should we get to the second goal?
Sure.
Since it all comes kind of quick, right? The second goal's in the 30th minute.
Yep.
It's Savarino. Oh, this is the one where essentially Matt Miazga tracks Solomon Rondon out, loses the header. Aaron Long tracks Savarino backwards and deep. So we end up with like a 20-yard split between our 2 centre-backs, one forward and one backwards. Rondon obviously wins the flick on because he's gigantic, and even Miazga should know that maybe you don't back yourself against Rondon to win balls in the air.
But also, if you don't put anybody in front of him, which I think was the point Stu Holden was making, you front and follow. You put one in front to disrupt, you put one in behind to challenge, make him uncomfortable, maybe win the ball.
I think Holden was saying essentially Miazga should have passed Rondon off to Will Trapp so that Miazga could stay as part of the back four, which is all, I think front and follow or passing him off is much, much better than getting dragged out of position.
Yeah.
Do you think it was a case of being scared of Rondon? So Miazga just thinks, I've got to follow him, I've got to try and win this header?
I think... yes.
Because I've done that as a defender. I'm like, okay, that's my responsibility. I'm the only guy that can win this. I'll go with it, and I don't think about how I've just left my position. I've left a massive hole behind me.
Well, I don't think it's that I'm the only one who can deal with this, because it's also the case that Aaron Long overly follows Rondon for the third goal. So I think it's probably the 2 center backs have been told he is a beast in the air. Do not let him win the ball comfortably. You've always got to put pressure on him, and I think that's why they're that much more attuned to what he's doing. But I want to pause here to say that, again, it's U.S. fight and spirit and intensity comes into play here, not just because they don't win the header, but because, go back and watch, Venezuela take this throw-in. It's from a throw-in. They take it 15 yards up the field from where the ball goes out of bounds.
That's true.
Which is a minor thing. It happens all the time. But if you are alert to that...
It goes out in one half and they take it in the attacking half.
It literally goes out to the point where the Venezuela coach goes to get it from his bench, and when he turns around, they're taking the throw-in in front of the United States bench. A minor thing, but if you're the left back or if you're any American player who sees them walk up the field and take, you would scream. You and I would yell, "Hey ref, that's got to be further back."
You would step in the thrower's face and stop it happening.
Exactly, and no one does that. Again, it's just a lot of okay, things are happening, and it's it's sort of like being so focused on reacting that you're always reacting. Like you're always trying to put out fires, but never thinking about maybe just don't let them have the matches in the first place.
And I think that also applies to what Aaron Long does, because Savarino would have been offside from this run-down flick if Aaron Long hadn't followed him deep. I would have let him run offside, and then he's offside, right?
Exactly.
Instead, he goes deep with him. And gets beat, so Savarino is in on Stefan, right? And I think, isn't this the one that hits the post and then Savarino gets the rebound?
Yeah. I mean, and I don't really put any blame on Stefan there. I also, like, it's always easy in slow motion when the ball comes off the post because you see all the players kind of reacting to it. I've said it before, I think that always favors the attacker because they're already sort of in that mode, whereas the defenders are watching to see what happens. So I have a hard time faulting anybody for not making a strong play on it after the goal.
That's fair.
But in the lead up to it, certainly a lot more could have been done, and a lot more alertness to positioning could have been implemented.
All right, before we get to the ad break and maybe how we would fix things, we may as well do the third goal because it comes pretty fast.
Hooray.
Right? This is the Salomon Rondon goal where he basically gets the other side of Aaron Long. Aaron Long gets the right side of him, and then Rondon just falls in with a little cut and a bang of a left foot in the top corner. But again, this goal starts way back, right?
It does.
Starts with a failed US press.
Yes, and let's go there then first. I don't want to take us off on a different tangent for a moment. But yeah, it is the United States trying to win the ball back. I think thinking that they've put Venezuela in a position where they're kind of passing backwards. Their lines are a little bit disorganized. People are out of position. Now is the time to try to get them. But it's the United States sending people forward intermittently so that like when Aaron Long does enter the fray, it sort of is after a bunch of already players have stepped forward. Not
Tim
blaming
Reams all the way up there.
Not necessarily blaming Aaron Long for that, but just to say that like it's not as though everybody is attuned to it and everybody goes at once and suddenly there's a bunch of numbers there and Venezuela are suffocated.
And it's the guy that took the throw-in too far up the field and got away with it, Rosales, the right back. It's also Rosales that essentially breaks the US press because when it starts coming, he essentially just does one bit of like dribbling acceleration and then a nice pass infield, and he's broken the entire thing wide open, right?
Yeah,
so
I mean,
it's good stuff from Rosales.
And the point that I was going to make is that a number of times in this game, I found myself thinking, this is how it used to be in reverse. It used to be the United States bunkering and being not that exciting, but doing a very strong defensive job. And then when the situation's
then we break on Spain and Brazil in the Confederations Cup.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and that's what this goal looked like. It looked like a team that was sort of pull them in. Okay, now they're committed to forward. There's one slight opportunity on, and we've practiced and worked together enough that we can ping, 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 ping. And it is, I think I've got it as Rosales to Savarino, Savarino to Rosales again, Rosales to Herrera, Herrera to Rincon, Rincon to Rondon, goal. And it's bang, 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 bang.
Clips it over the top, right?
And it's quick passes. It is Rondon offside. We can talk about that.
But only slightly though, right? Not enough that we can really complain about it.
Yeah.
And it's not a good enough excuse, essentially.
No, and it's much more so to me, this is where Aaron Long is at fault because he has gone forward, tracking Rondon when the ball goes like central and away from that moment. Like you see Aaron Long start to drift back. He's aware that Rondon is there, but he sort of is like, oh, that ball's not going to go back to him.
Switches off for like, it's like a second and a half, right? It's almost nothing. It's the blink of it's maybe two blinks of an eye. But by the time Rondon is charging forward, you see Long do it like a quick look and like, oh no, he's got away. And he does actually catch up because he's faster than Rondon, but doesn't catch up enough to make it hard to get to the ball first, essentially.
Yeah.
And this is why Rondon has the scoring opportunity.
Yep. Yeah. So it was sort of the United States being exposed for all of these sort of mistakes in mentality and lack of sharpness really all kind of coming together for a third goal. And suddenly the United States is 3-0 down inside of, 36 minutes?
Yeah, they are. All right, so before we try and fix all our problems,
sure,
should we take a break?
Let's do it.
For today's first ad from our friends at SeatGeek. SeatGeek, thank you for sponsoring today's show, SeatGeek.
I would agree. SeatGeek, longtime sponsors. They make buying and selling tickets to any type of live event is far more easier than it's ever been, Mr. Grove.
And if you want to go to, a comedy show, a music show, anything like that, you can trust the SeatGeek ticket. When you buy a ticket via SeatGeek, it's the real deal.
We always start listing, and then we instantly panic, both of us. It's always like comedy, sports, whatever you want.
I think it's good for us to get out there that it's not just all soccer on SeatGeek. It's all kinds of live events, because we always end up recommending a soccer event.
Yeah. So say you were going to buy tickets to a Gold Cup matchup for the U.S., and now you're thinking, I don't know if I can subject myself to that. There are many, many, many other types of shows out there that you can buy tickets to.
What, did you find any?
I mean, no, I was looking up Gold Cup. I've been looking up, like the various competitions, the various ranges of prices there. But yeah, it's worth noting there are tickets to, say, maybe you want to watch Mexico play. Maybe that's the way to go.
So you're recommending non-US tickets?
No, I think
There might be people selling their tickets on SeatGeek right now.
There may be. I would not espouse abandoning the U.S. national team. I would instead say maybe double down, but then feel justified in booing if things don't go well.
Well, how about once you've used SeatGeek, if you wanted to get $10 off. Mm-hmm. Because you think you deserve $10 off because you shouldn't have to pay full price to watch the US men's national team. Is there a way we could do that with SeatGeek, Taylor? He said, knowing the answer full well.
I figured you did. Yes, listeners could use the promo code TSS for $10 off their first purchase. You can use that for concert tickets, sports, comedy, whatever you want. That's promo code TSS for $10 off your first purchase.
Remember, SeatGeek supports us, so you could support SeatGeek.
There we are. Support SeatGeek.
Yeah, and support the US national team, even when things look bad.
All right. So things did look bad. Before we get into how we'd fix it, I did want to say there were two things that I thought were worth mentioning as somewhat positive.
Yeah.
One is a player whose name I don't think we've even mentioned yet, but I did want to talk about briefly. It's Gyasi Zardes, because he is one who, again, when I saw the lineups, I was not particularly thrilled. I have no animosity towards Gyasi Zardes. It's just we haven't seen Josie Altidore in a while. I was excited to see him and see what else he brings to the table.
Yep.
Rewatching it, I thought Gyasi Zardes was a player who was pretty mobile, did a good job of dropping in and trying to find space, came back and won the ball on a couple of occasions.
System-wise, it felt wrong, right? That he had to be the guy that came deeper than McKennie and rolled down. Like almost, he backwards broke through the Venezuelan lines. It's like he broke into prison.
Yeah, exactly.
To receive the ball in his own half.
Yep.
And then, I don't know, something about that felt wrong because it meant someone else should have been doing it, and Zardes should have been higher, causing more trouble.
True, very true.
But it speaks well of him that he made that effort to come and show for the ball.
But there were multiple occasions when you would get like a very wide angle, such as it was of the field, that you would see the U.S. with like 4 defenders back, then Will Trapp, then a whole bunch of space, and then 5 players kind of standing in a line. Yeah. And the only one who I saw routinely really darting in, Tyler Boyd did it to some extent, but Gyasi Zardes did a lot of dropping in and trying to find space. So I enjoyed that. And then I'm going to double down and say that I enjoyed Dwayne Holmes. And I think what he brought into the team, he brought a liveliness, he brought a lot of movement. We saw him actually finding space, and we saw the energy. We saw the frustration of, no, don't play it backwards. Why aren't you there? This needs to be here. That's the type of presence I want. I didn't like the sort of like, I guess it's just the way it goes. As long as I'm not at fault, I'll just keep passing the ball.
Yep.
You're like, not literally, but very figuratively passing the buck.
What we've seen, so it's basically 2 30-minute performances we've seen from Dwayne Holmes for the US national team, right, against Jamaica and against Venezuela. And I take Bobby Warshaw's point from the last show that we haven't seen that much of him, so we can't fully judge him. Mm-hmm. But I've seen 2 30-minute performances for the US, and I want more. Yeah. Because he's the guy that seems to me will, one, accelerate out of pressure and, open something up, and then play a somewhat risky ball and then make a move afterwards as well to be available for the next pass. I've seen him charge people down. I just think that he brings a sort of the life to the central midfield that was lacking for the first 60 minutes of both games.
Yep.
Jamaica and Venezuela.
And I'm going to go way over the top now to go to like we've talked about like stories of like when players are first signed, how the veterans on those teams will test them by like driving the ball at them as hard as they can to see how the players kind of respond to
There's
it.
There's a great Peter Crouch podcast about this where he said when he joined Liverpool, right, it was the first big club. He'd been at like Portsmouth and Villa and stuff before. And his first practice session, Gerrard would slam balls into his feet looking for the layoff because Gerrard likes to have a layoff and shoot. And essentially Crouch couldn't do it to begin with, but Gerrard kept doing it until Crouch got good at it. And then that became a Liverpool thing.
There you go.
Yeah.
And
sorry, I just wanted to tell that story.
No, it's a good story. And I guess the reason why I'm happy you told it is because I saw moments where Dwayne Holmes would work to win the ball back and he would play a fairly driven ball, but it was a line-splitting ball.
Yeah.
The one that stands out...
Roldan?
Yes, is into the feet of Roldan, who it popped up in the air, and you could see him get angry.
Yep.
And it wasn't a, like, whirl around in frustration and walk away, but it was definitely like, that's got to be better.
Yep.
And that's what I want. That's
what you want on the national team, right?
Yeah, because it does need to be better. And I will say Christian Roldan had a very poor game, in my opinion.
Yeah, there were a lot of misplaced passes, and especially just situations like you just described, where the ball would go into him, and he would either be too slow, like take too many touches and slow the whole thing down, or would lose possession.
Yep.
Yeah, I was very frustrated with Christian Roldan this game.
Roldan and Areola had particularly poor games. Maybe the worst game I've seen from Paul Areola.
I love
in a US
Areola's
jersey.
work rate, but this is a game where just nothing came off for him at all, right?
Including 2 different shooting opportunities. Yeah, or 3 different shooting opportunities, actually. So I just enjoyed, to go back to it, I enjoyed Dwayne Holmes demanding more of his teammates and expecting more.
Yeah, we want to see more of that, right?
Yeah.
Do you think there's a problem of sort of leadership, essentially?
100%.
There isn't someone on the field demanding more of everybody?
Yeah.
Is this, I don't mean this to be a leading question, but is this a creation, is this a Berhalter-created problem? I saw the press conference where he talked about we haven't selected a full-time captain yet. We want to give different people chances to show leadership. That's why you've seen Tim Ream with the armband. You've seen Aaron Long with the armband. You've seen Will Trapp with the armband. It's just been rotated around, right?
I think it's a Kuva problem, to be honest. I think it's a problem of not qualifying for the World Cup means not only do you not have the World Cup, so not only do people lose out on valuable experience and you can bring like new faces through in meaningful matches, but I think it's also that there's a reason why people were never, like, there were people out there who were never big fans of Michael Bradley. There are significantly more of them after the United States failed to qualify because Michael Bradley and Josie Altidore were kind of faces of that failure to qualify.
Yeah.
So, and I say that to say that, so there's some veteran players who have been involved in the team who I think now there is an element of, do we look to them? Is there going to be a stink around that? Do we want to bring other people through? And that's why we didn't see Bradley called in and Josie called in for at least a couple games there. And I think so that if you kind of remove some of that old guard from the equation, then you literally have to look at the new guard and you have to see who can do it. And then, yes, I think it does become a Berhalter thing of, well, we're not sure. We haven't had everybody in there. Well, we don't necessarily know if we want to have this person in there right now. And so I think the kind of past situation that led to Berhalter being hired factors into it, but then also some of the decisions since then I think have led to situations like today where nobody seems entirely comfortable being the one to step forward and get vocal.
All right, Dwayne Holmes for captain.
Fine.
Maybe one day.
Somebody for captain.
One day.
How about that?
I would like a permanent captain before the Gold Cup starts next week.
Yeah.
Maybe.
That'd be fine. That'd be nice.
Okay, before we get into fixing problems, I keep saying we're going to do it. What did you make of Tyler Boyd's debut?
I enjoyed it. I did.
He got like an hour or so, right?
He did. I thought they were, I mean, from what we were able to see of him attacking, which was in like maybe the first 10 minutes, again, is when the United States, I thought, looked the most on the front foot.
Yeah.
That was when we did see a few line-splitting passes.
Was it like 70% possession US in the first
I think it was 70,
10 minutes?
Yeah, something like that. It was like 77% possession for the US in the first 15, I think, even after the goal, or 16. And so I thought he was okay. I thought you could definitely see some of the lack of familiarity where he would like look around and then go and like sprint 15 yards. Yeah. And that wasn't just like sprinting 15 yards to show. It was sort of the like, oh, wait, Nick Lima's there? Then I need to be here. Oh, I better get there. And then he would run. But I think overall, I thought he did well. And I think in a game when there were a lot of people whose stock went down and who I did not enjoy, he doesn't stand out in a negative way, which I feel like might be a positive.
I also saw yesterday's press conference where Berhalter said that basically Boyd isn't fully fit and would play limited minutes. So we were seeing a Boyd at least slightly reduced from full fitness. But this leads me on to a bigger point about this whole roster. It seems like there are a bunch of injury problems.
Yep.
I feel like it's not talked about much, but Bradley, like the reason he hasn't played against Jamaica and Venezuela is that he's not fully fit. Tyler Adams is coming in late because he needed a rest. Christian Pulisic's only just joined the squad because he's coming in late. Josie Altidore apparently was carrying something, so that's why he only played 45 minutes today and not at all against Jamaica. Jassy Zardes also was, a late scratch against Jamaica. So we suddenly have all kinds of injury problems.
Yes, which I would not have been so worried about before the Jamaica game. You asked me that, like, do you think it's weird at all that like Tyler Adams and Christian Pulisic just aren't with the team? And I was like, yeah, I mean, it's fine. We're giving them a break and we're getting like more people, more minutes. And that's the case if you win and everybody stays healthy. But if you lose both games 4-0 aggregate and have a couple injuries coming out of it, then those questions do become a bit more head scratcher to me.
It feels to me like these two games, Jamaica and Venezuela, have been used as almost just training camp games. Like, we'll just get some players some fitness, give this guy 45 minutes, this guy 45 minutes, and we'll be ready for the Gold Cup against Guyana.
Yeah.
But that really, really scares me because now there hasn't been a full run out with the actual 11. And there hasn't been you haven't seen any progression of the system, right? The Greg Berhalter, if anything, it's gone backwards in that we've been doing something that looks like it, but really ineffectively. So now I'm suddenly very worried about what happens against Guyana.
Yeah, I think that's justified because to your earlier question about who should be the permanent captain or if they were going to appoint a permanent captain, I have no idea who it would be because I think the answer might have been Will Trapp heading into these games. He played consistently. He had captained. I think that was maybe who it would have been. But he has looked bad in these two games. We talked about some of the reasons why, but I think he didn't help himself. And so once you lose that a little bit, I don't know who you look to be those players who come in and lead the attack and make things happen. And it makes me more concerned than I was for sure.
Okay, so Gold Cup starts for the US Tuesday, June 18th against Guyana. The other opponents in the group are Panama, and Trinidad and Tobago. Those are not easy games, right? I don't know much about Ghana. We will do before, right?
It's safe to say that all three of them are going to be defensive.
Yes. So this is what I was getting at. Like the 4-5-1 that Venezuela massively frustrated the US with. Let's assume we're up against a version of that against Guyana and probably against Panama, I would say.
Yep.
I've seen Panama do that before. How would we fix all these problems? Essentially, what would be our starting lineup is maybe a good way to think of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you still go Zach Steffen in goal, even with the Jamaica and Venezuela mistakes?
I think I would.
Okay.
I think so.
Would you give him a talking to beforehand?
I would, yes. This is where I'll say, like, this is me speaking as me, as opposed to Greg Berhalter, because the reality is I don't know if Sean Johnson and Tyler Miller would be better with their feet. I remember Sean Johnson not looking so good with his feet this season. So in terms of those three options...
There's one very specific moment.
Yes.
Right?
So in terms of those three options, I don't necessarily know that one of them is like, oh, he can definitely pass out of the back and look way better than the other three.
Yeah.
So I'm inclined to say, you stick with Steffen. Long term, this has made me worry a little bit.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen him look necessarily like at fault in his shot stopping or his positioning when it comes to the goals.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit more okay with it.
Are we a little concerned with Berhalter appearing to have favourites? Because I would argue that like Steffen, do you remember the Berhalter
his halftime analysis was not great.
Yeah, where he basically said, when you try to play at the back, that happens, as opposed to thinking that's twice in 2 games that he's given up massive goal scoring opportunities.
Yeah.
And I wonder about like the Zardes over Sargent thing, which you and I haven't talked about. You and Bobby got into it deeply, so I don't want to rehash it. But I wonder if some element of Berhalter thinking Zardes is ahead of Sargent is just that he knows Zardes' game better because he spent the year with him at Columbus. Maybe Will Trapp gets more opportunities than some other players at that number 6 spot because he's Berhalter's guy. Maybe Omar Gonzalez is on the roster.
That strangely is Exhibit A, I think.
The Gonzalez thing.
Yeah.
So the thing I read, I should probably confirm this before starting the show, but I'm pretty confident in this, is that when Berhalter joined the LA Galaxy as a veteran, right, he came back and joined Galaxy. Omar Gonzalez, I believe, was his roommate, and because they played the same position, Berhalter kind of mentored Gonzalez a little bit. So I think there's a connection there between those guys, which kind of explains why Omar Gonzalez was brought back in when, let's say, guys of a similar generation like Matt Beasler were not. Right? And I will say Gonzalez was okay against Jamaica, right? But it starts to worry me that Berhalter just has people that he knows better, that he's more willing to put faith in, and then Dwayne Holmes only gets 30 minutes.
Yeah. I take your point.
Or Josh Sargent is off the roster.
Like the halftime one I struggle with because on the one hand, it seemed a little bit like he was sort of like, these things happen. It's like, no, well, they shouldn't. And also they've happened twice now. But it may also be the case that like, while you and I have a more... Like if that were our team, I think we would be frustrated, but we also wouldn't necessarily go into halftime and scream at the goalkeeper. We'd be like, hey, it's got to be a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think he probably doesn't want to completely bury Zach Steffen at a time when his confidence is probably low.
Fair, that's fair, yeah.
I do think, though, that when you have the goalkeeper visibly screaming at another player, you probably need to do something about that because somebody looks at fault there. Yeah. So that's a little bit of an aside. And
even with Steffen screaming at McKennie, it still looks like Steffen's at fault.
It does. So the question was then, like, what would I like to see in terms of starting 11, in terms of formation?
So essentially, I think what I'm arguing for, or setting up to argue for, is less preferential treatment for Berhalter's guys, right? When we're going in here.
Yeah,
which means to me, like, Bradley should start if he's fit over Trapp.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, if that doesn't happen, I would be surprised.
Yeah, okay.
I am, maybe just because it's easier right now, I'm glad to say, like, I'm not as concerned about personnel. I think the bigger thing for me is what those personnel do. Because if it doesn't really matter who you put in there, if they're standing static behind a line of defenders, it's not going to change the result. So I think what I would much prefer to see is some obvious signs that the United States has worked towards having more possession with intent, possession with purpose. And that's what I would want to see. That's what I would want to work on were I in charge.
Okay. Let's maybe reconstruct this midfield because that seems to be part of the problem, right? So would you say Bradley, Pulisic, McKennie? Would you be happy with that starting 3 going into the Gold Cup against Guyana?
I'm not trying to be difficult. It's like it isn't about that for me. It's not about like who goes in there because again, if it's those two just standing there waiting for the ball, it doesn't do anything. What I would happily see that midfield, but I would want that midfield to be like I'm looking for. What I will be looking for in that first game against Guyana is are the midfielders dropping in? Are they providing lateral support for Will Trapp?
And if that's what you want, honestly, I would go Holmes over McKennie.
Yeah,
based on the evidence of what I've seen. And
I'm
a big McKennie fan.
I really it's not just because it's like recency bias and Bobby Warshaw has polluted my brain, but it is the case that especially given what the limitations we saw today were with some of the movement and like the lack of decision making in midfield, I do think I'm on board with him now. If you're going to do that right back into center midfield, put Weston McKennie there, put Tyler Adams as your 6, move Christian Pulisic out wide because wide attack was a big problem for the United States today.
It would be an upgrade on the Paul Areola
and start Dwayne Holmes.
Right?
And I think that makes sense. Except now I think I've taken both midfielders out. So then we still need a number 10. I'm not sure what you do there.
I guess Christian Roldan's back in.
Yeah, probably. Maybe not. Maybe we play Pulisic central.
Yeah.
And that is sort of, once you start moving pieces around, inevitably you're going to leave yourself with like, ooh, but I have not put in a left midfielder.
I think I'm with you that maybe this performance and trying to play this system suggests to me that maybe there should at least be the consideration of some sort of shake-up. Yeah. I'm sure Berhalter will argue, we've got to stay the course, don't panic, keep working on our system, keep doing the thing. But it might be time to put someone else at number 6, right? Whether it's McKennie or Adams or someone else.
Look, I understand why he says that. I understand why he says it's going to take time. There's going to be patience. We've got to try different things. We want to get everybody comfortable. I understand why certain people in the media are going to say that same thing and echo those statements. It doesn't mean that people need to do it. And that's kind of the reality, is that they can ask for that, but the U.S. Soccer Federation has not earned patience. That's not a thing that they deserve just because they are. And so while I understand that would be useful for the U.S. national team to lose 3-0, but still get cheered because you're our team, that's not the goodwill that they've created. Instead, they've created a feeling of, are things getting better? Because it feels like maybe they're not. And I think they've got to prove that. So I think that's the other thing I would want to see is intent that things are getting better.
Here's a major thing I would like to see that I think would make things better. When we don't have the ball and we collapse into that 4-4-2, I get that when it's 0-0 or you're 1-0 ahead, and it's quite a mid to low block that we sit in, right? It's kind of compact and tight, and it's meant to make us hard to get through. When we're losing, that needs to go.
Yep.
Right? When we were 1-0 down to Jamaica with 15 minutes to go, we should not have been sitting in a 4-4-2 and letting them come at us. When we're 3-0 down to Venezuela, we should not be sitting in a 4-4-2 and letting them come at us. I would like to see a second or third gear where we go press and try and win the ball back.
100% agree. I just wanted to interject for a moment to say that you're absolutely right. And for it's maybe obvious, but it's worth reiterating that, number one, because we're losing. So sitting back isn't doing it. But also, number two is that if we're losing, the other team is winning. And the other team is therefore not going to be inclined to just throw the ball forward the way they would have been to get that lead.
Right.
So in the end, you're not preparing for anything useful because you're sitting off and the other team is sitting off. It doesn't actually help you get better at either thing.
So my hope, tell me if I'm being too optimistic here, my hope is that even though we were 1-0 down to Jamaica and 3-0 down to Venezuela, the reason that Berhalter seemed happy to keep the players in the sort of lowish block, mid to low block 4-4-2 and not go chasing the ball too much is because we were just practicing that system as opposed to trying to win that game.
But do you see what I'm saying,
Is that okay or not?
No, but do you see, that's exactly what I'm saying, is that you're practicing a system against a team that isn't actually trying to play anymore.
Right. So
they're just fine, you guys sit back, we'll keep the ball with our center backs. We're winning. Yeah. You need to come get the ball. So you're practicing a system against a team that
and maybe you should practice chasing a game properly.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like that. You're not actually practicing for a team that's going at you. You're practicing for a team that's never, ever going to be particularly attacking.
Right.
So it doesn't end up accomplishing any of the goals.
So I think what I'm saying is, though, I'm hoping that if we're somehow 1-0 down to Guyana and it's half-time, we go out in the second half with a let's hunt this down and win the ball.
Oh, yeah, that I 1,000,000% agree.
You think that'll happen? Or do you think we'll come out in the low 4-4-2 block and be like, oh, yeah, but eventually we'll take the ball off and then we'll do our possession thing and eventually we'll open them up and we'll create a chance and that's how we'll get a goal? Because that's what it feels like watching this team. And it worries me that that's the plan for when it gets real. Because that's the thing, it gets real, right? Tuesday, June 18th, it gets real. It's a proper match for points.
I think that Berhalter has talked the talk in the sense that he hasn't panicked. In as much as he has said it is not the time to panic, we shouldn't be panicking, I think the way he has approached these two friendlies have been, I'm not just going to throw on 4 attacking subs because we're losing 1-0 or 3-0 in a friendly.
Yeah.
And I don't love that approach.
Also, most of them are injured.
Also that.
And I only have Morris and Holmes to throw on.
Yeah, I personally don't enjoy that approach, but I think that's what he is trying to do. I would be shocked if he kept doing that in games that the United States was trailing or not doing well in the Gold Cup.
Yeah.
Because once you're into competitive games that do matter, I don't think it's going to be against Guyana. But say it's 0-0 at halftime against Panama because they are ultra bunkered. if we come out and it's still Will Trapp on the ball, putting his foot on it, looking around, dropping it to a center back.
And the midfielders are all deep in opposition territory and it can't be found.
I will go back into the fetal position, which is where I went briefly during this game today.
For the first time ever. Well, I guess the second time ever. Originally when you were a fetus.
Yes. It was the first time that I have, like, it literally, the Roldan, Jordan Morris, like, lack of communication at the back post, and I think Morris ended up kind of saving a shot.
Oh, yeah.
That was the one that made me kind of lay down to the fetal position for a moment. Yeah.
Oh, not the Areola miss at the other post?
I think that just made me cry.
Yeah.
That just made me... I think at that point I just laughed.
Final thing worth noting. Yeah. It did seem like the US got more chances towards the end. We went back and looked at it. Venezuela opened up, didn't they? They took Rincon off, one of the central midfielders, and brought on Joseph Martinez.
Yeah, they took off a holding midfielder, their like defensive organizer, and brought on an attacker. Yeah.
So they essentially opened up to the United States. So a lot of the space we got, there's a lot of crosses coming in, a lot of moving forward. Essentially because Venezuela just weren't scared enough to have to defend the lead, and were happily just trying out the 4-4-2.
That more than anything.
It's an insult, right?
I just realized that, yes, and that bums me out more than anything we've just talked about, is that Venezuela ahead 3-0, we're like, all right, let's bring on an attacking player to see what happens when the other team gets stretched. Like, it's definitely not worried about the United States fighting their way back in. It's just trying to do different looks because you're playing a weaker team.
Okay, we need to take a bit of a break from the US for a few days.
Things are great.
And we'll start thinking about this team again, a few days before the Gold Cup starts, but a few days before that Guyana game. We'll get a proper preview out. We'll know what to look for from Guyana and what we hope the US is actually going to do.
We're going to take a break from this specific US national team because we will be talking, them, but also we'll be talking about the team that makes people happier, the US women's national team, aplenty this week. They
play this Tuesday.
They sure do.
We'll have a preview out of USA Thailand on Monday.
And at least one review, but maybe 7. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
All right, before we talk U20s, today's show is sponsored by Talisman Caps.
It sure is.
Friends at Talisman Caps in St. Paul, Minnesota. I got it right first time this time. I didn't pretend Minneapolis was a state.
Are you a U.S. national team player who just played an embarrassing game on U.S. soil and isn't too proud, and when you leave the stadium you don't want to be recognized? Put on a baseball hat. It makes it harder for people to know who you are. And if you put on a Talisman cap, it will look so nice with such like cool designs that people will be focused on the hat. You can walk through easily and no one will notice.
You'll be stylish and disguised.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
If you recently won the Champions League, which none of the U.S. players did, but if you are one of those players, you could wear an LFC hat.
You could?
Yeah. You could wear the Liverbird 5-panel hat that they've just brought back.
If you're Mohamed Salah, you could wear the hat that has you on it. Yeah. That would be a weird thing that you could definitely go for.
If you're Mia Hamm, you could wear the hat that has you on it.
This is true.
Yeah, there's someone to be proud
of. Are we now just going to list players who could wear their own hat?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, who else is on there? There's a Valderrama hat, there's a Perlo hat.
Brandy Chastain, as I've said before.
Yeah.
You can get the Brandy Chastain one on there.
Yeah. There's lots of Minnesota stuff, obviously. And there's a Cooligans one. We should give a shout to the Cooligans. They have their own hat with Talisman caps.
Sure.
And like I said before, if you want to look like a dope, wear the Cooligans hat.
There we go. Exactly.
What if you wanted to get 20% off, Tyler?
Well, first of all, they should be slightly less greedy because you don't just get 20% off. That's not just a natural thing unless you listen to this show, in which case you do. Because you can use the promo code TotalSoccer20 to get 20% off any order over $35 or more at Talisman Caps. Worth noting, $35 is the price of one cap. So, buy a cap, get 20% off, and then hide from the public if you're a U.S. national team player.
And you'll be supporting a proper soccer-focused independent business in Minnesota.
You will indeed.
Yeah.
So one more time, that's TotalSoccer20 to get 20% off any order of $35 or more. Thank you very much to Talisman Caps for sponsoring today's episode. Thank you to today's episode for being done talking about the U.S. men's senior national team. Now let's talk about the U20s.
Yep, let's completely change track from one crushing defeat to a South American team to another.
I mean, crushing is a word. I was disappointing for this one.
It was the Under-20 World Cup quarter-final.
It was.
So there is that. That genuinely is an achievement to get there again. We keep doing it.
Yeah.
We keep not quite progressing beyond it. I want to say, maybe one thing to note at the top of this. So the USA lost 2-1. I'm sure most people will know this already. To Ecuador. This Ecuador team is better than you think, right?
100%.
This Ecuador team is the Venezuela Under-20 team of 2017 that made the final after beating the US in the quarterfinals.
Yes. I was hoping you would take that all the way home as opposed to being like, they're Venezuela. And everybody would be like, great. Is that good? Yes.
So it's not that we lost to an inferior team. We lost to a very, very good team.
We lost to the U20 South American champions.
They are the U20 South American champions. So there is that. And they had some very impressive players. But we still lost.
We did.
And we have to talk about why we lost.
We do.
Should we, before we go big picture, should we just talk about maybe the specifics of the goals?
Sure.
I think So the US conceded 2 goals with a Tim Weah equaliser in between, all in the first half. I would argue that the Cifuentes goal and the Espinosa goal both result from a lack of defensive pressure when Ecuadorian attackers approach the top of our box.
And I would nod.
You would nod, yes.
Yes.
So if you go back and watch that, it's a great strike from Cifuentes, right, for the very first goal. But Mendes lets him cut and then backs off. Chris Durkin comes charging in, and I really think he's about to, every time I see it, I think he's about to tackle Cifuentes. Instead, he gets into the Bradley crouch, right? Yep. He gets into defensive crouch a few yards off of Cifuentes. And Cifuentes is shaping to shoot this whole time. The minute he cuts on Mendes, his body shape says, I'm shooting.
Yep.
And he shoots, and no one pressures him.
And I kind of wish that they had listened to Travis and I preview this game for Top Drawer Soccer, because one of the things I was pointing out is that Ecuador, and they did do this a lot, were very content to pass the ball at the top of the box and kind of probe until they thought maybe there was a through ball on, or they would go for the overly elaborate, lifted ball.
Yeah.
But that was after the shooting chance wasn't on, because the first thing that they would do is look to shoot from distance. They have scored plenty of goals from there. It's an easy way to catch defenses out, especially at U20 level where maybe they're stretched or they're committed forward or anything like that. Ecuador were happy to shoot from distance, and it feels like the U.S. prioritized getting back into their rough defensive shape and then deal with it. And while they were getting back into shape, Ecuador were shooting and scoring.
Does this feel somewhat similar to our worries about the Berhalter team, where there's a focus on being in a specific shape, even though that's not necessarily the best shape to be in for that moment?
Yeah. There's an emphasis on that.
To paraphrase Roy Keane, sometimes you just got to go make the tackle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that is also the other aspect of it is, again, there were moments in this game where I didn't see the heart, the fight, the willingness to be at fault. Yeah. That if you're a defender and you're backpedaling, there's a time when you think, maybe I'll let this cross go in and then someone else can deal with it. But as long as I don't get beat for pace one-on-one or humiliated or megged, I'm okay with it. And I do think there were sequences here, especially in this first goal,
Mendes and Durkin, definitely. Yeah. Neither of them took responsibility. Nope. Neither of them took defensive responsibility.
No. Right? And I would say more so than Mendes, that to me is a concern for Chris Durkin. Because
that's his job.
Exactly.
It's not Mendes' job, it's Chris Durkin's job.
And he's also involved in the second goal, I believe. And it did feel like it was a weak game from him overall and brought about further questions than I already had.
So the second goal, most people remember was it offside, was it not offside?
Yeah.
Because, Campana squares it to Espinosa. And it does look like he's offside because Espinosa is sort of ahead of the line.
Yep.
But the ball is behind the ball, right? So that's why, after that long review, Espinosa was ruled onside.
It's one of the strange situations in which I think because Ochoa, the U.S. goalkeeper, has come out to make a play on the initial ball, or he dove and then kind of tries to get back up and block the ball from Campana.
Yeah.
I think when the ball goes to Espinosa, there's no one in front of him, so it looks like, goalkeeper's off his line, there's no defenders there. He's definitely offside, but you're right. That one angle shows it. He is square with the ball slightly behind it when it's played, so he's always onside.
Oh, but the scramble is created by a Plata shot from distance, which Ochoa doesn't touch it, right? It hits the bar and comes back down. But it's the same thing again, right? It's an Ecuadorian attacker at the top of the box with room to shoot. I can't remember if it's Gloucester or Tim Weah or both that should have closed him down.
It's Gloucester who's kind of squaring him up. I think Tim Weah slides across because the Venezuela right back, whose name I forget.
It's Espinosa.
There we go.
It's Espinosa has made the overlapping run.
Goodness
and
gracious.
So you're right. Weah is pointing for Gloucester to go cover him, which I think is the correct call. But then Weah doesn't step to Plata, right?
And then
Espinosa cuts
someone
across.
Doesn't track. Yeah,
he loses Gloucester, and Keita picks him up, and it's in that moment that he's free.
Yeah. It's tough on Gloucester because it's kind of like trying to on the fly slide over, and then it's also trying to track a runner, and then it's the ball coming off the bar and a kind of a scrum. So I have a harder.
Gloucester slides outside and Espinosa slides inside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't put as much fault on Gloucester there, but yes, I think the United States maybe should have been slightly more aware of the shooting potential of Ecuador.
So again, there's just a theme here, right, of just not blocking shots at the top of the box, right? There is a goal in between.
There is.
That Tim Weah scores.
He does.
And it's got some positives in it.
It does.
And I think it's got a lot of, I would argue the three of the big positives of this whole tournament are Paxton Pomacao making things happen.
Yep.
Like this, we win a corner essentially because he hits this beautiful diagonal pass that splits some lines for Chris Gloucester. Chris Gloucester firing in a low cross for Sebastian Soto that I really, really liked.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't find him, but you can see the idea there is I'm going to slip this behind the defense and into the path of Soto.
It doesn't find him because the defender has to make like a dramatic interception to put out for a corner. Otherwise, it absolutely is going to find him for a goal.
So it was a good ball. Right? It was a good, dangerous ball.
Unless he shoots like Paul Arriola, in which case it won't be a goal.
So we win a corner kick. Corner comes in. I think Richards' header is like... Chris Richards gets to the ball. Yeah. It's a Mendes corner. Richards' header gets to the ball. It pops up off an Ecuadorian defender.
Yeah.
And then the other big thing I think from this tournament is Tim Weah just took his moments.
Yep.
Right? And this was a moment where Tim Weah was, all right, I'm smashing this left-footed volley.
Yes. And he did. And then ran to the corner, celebrated with his teammates. And this also stood out to me is that they huddle up. Paxton Pomykal, you can see in the replay, starts trying to tell everybody. And it's a lot of like, think.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of, right? Yeah, I think it's a lot of slow down. And everybody sort of, the huddle starts to break up, and Timothy Weah is like, no. And then you see him like kind of reset the group, repoint to his head, and it does feel like he is like, no, I am going to make sure that everybody is definitely listening and definitely on the same page. And I enjoyed that he could have taken playing with the U20s as like a slight. It could have been I don't really care. I should have been playing with the national team, the senior national team, and I wasn't given that opportunity. And I really appreciate that he took the opportunity. He took the occasion to become a leader. He was clearly looked to as a leader by this squad.
Yeah.
And I think he repaid that with goals in timely moments.
I actually think you saw progression throughout the tournament as well. I would argue in the first game against Ukraine, he was a little bit like selfish maybe. And like his version of leadership was, I'm just going to make things happen.
Yeah,
and I think
he was aware of. I am Timothy Weah. I played for the national team. I played for PSG.
My dad's the president of
Give
Liberia.
me the ball. Yeah, that too, probably. That probably doesn't hurt.
And a former Ballon d'Or winner.
Also that.
But yeah, I think you saw him take a leadership role in terms of connecting play throughout the tournament as well. Yep. So yeah, I think this ends up being a good tournament for Tim Weah.
Yes, absolutely. I think
his growth as a player, maybe even.
Yeah, and given the dearth of options out wide for the senior national team attack, I feel like maybe he could go play for them too.
This is a shame, right?
Even though he won't.
He can't go and play on the Gold Cup roster now. He was on the preliminary squad, and also you can't play a U20 World Cup and then go play another tournament. It's just too much to ask of one player. But there is an argument that maybe he had more to gain from starring at a U20 World Cup because he's never been at one before, whereas Josh Sargent has.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I take your point there. I would say that the three players who I think, if you were to ask me, which maybe you were going to, I'm going to jump the gun and say if there were three players in this squad who I think are most likely to get national team looks the soonest.
You're setting yourself up with your own question.
I am indeed.
Beautiful.
I would say
I could just leave.
I would say it would be Timothy Weah. Obviously.
Yes.
I would say Paxton Pomykal and I would say Chris Richards. Those are the three that I thought seemed most ready for prime time.
Yeah.
Paxton Pomykal maybe third on that list because while he, I think, was a standout performer for the U.S. in his work rate, in like the way he would play kind of incisive balls, I also saw moments where he took the bait and he would get into physical altercations with players, or he would sort of, you hit me, so I'm going to knock you back, not recognizing that the result of that was then getting hit again by the opposite team.
Would Paxton Pomykal have outperformed Georgi Mihailovic against Jamaica?
I don't know, because I think they're both playing in Major League Soccer.
I think maybe I could have. So.
I
don't mean that.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know, because I'll be honest, I don't think I've watched enough of The Fire to know if that role for what he was doing for the U.S. is similar to what he does for The Fire, but I'm inclined to say it probably isn't, just because I think I said...
It's at least not the 210s type thing.
Yeah. So I think maybe, but I also think he is smaller in size, Paxton Pomykal, which I think is going to hurt him a little bit in some of the national team looks he's going to get. Maybe he does better, but I also think there's an equal chance that, again, some of the deficiencies in the players around him would have led to an equally disappointing result.
Same question. Paxton Pomykal, would he have outperformed Christian Roldan against Venezuela?
No comment.
No comment.
What do you think?
I think maybe. I think he might have held on to the ball better when it was played into him. I think he might have a better first touch than Roldan. He might be taking better care of the ball. He might be able to just take a touch out of pressure better. But I think we're getting into a dangerous thing where you see someone at U20 level and you see them do well at U20 level and you think, oh, he could just do that for the national team. And I think that might be a trap that we all fall into of making that jump a little too far, right?
100%. I would say that it's...
Well, Pomykal has played for FC Dallas in MLS, so he's played against grown men comfortably.
I mean, as has Cedillo. That doesn't mean they're going to play for the U20s. Yeah, that was frustrating to me. But anyway, I would say, though, that, when I give my list of the three, it's like Timothy Weah, and then there's some distance, and then Paxton Pomykal and Chris Richards. I wouldn't expect those national team call-ups necessarily soon. That said, maybe they get called up tomorrow. We'll see.
I think Richards still has a lot to learn. That thing where he was dragged out of position against France. I think, basically, there's a lot of promise there, especially...
Yeah, what national team defender would ever get drawn out against an opponent leaving space in behind? That never happens.
But especially Chris Richards on the ball gave me a lot of hope for the future. He's not someone that I think should go in the national team straight away, but I did see the news that he was promoted from the Bayern U19s to Bayern 2. So he'll be playing professional soccer, but at the third tier of the Bundesliga next season.
So there's that.
So it's a beginning, right? And we'll see where that goes, but there's hope there for a really impressive future centre-back.
Certainly.
What about Sergiño Dest?
Mm-hmm. Good call. I forgot about Sergiño Dest.
Yeah,
he is the other. I would add him to that list. It's a 4-man list now.
Okay.
Because yes, he has the bad defensive play or lack of defensive play in the opener against Ukraine.
It's a ball in the air, right? That he basically does not know how to take an angle or head a ball or challenge in the air.
Yeah. I would say,
which is a major problem.
It is. I didn't see it a lot in the rest of the tournament. Nothing that stands out of my head, so I'm inclined to say that maybe that was just a one-off first game of the tournament. He's scrambling backwards.
I think it's more that other teams don't play like that. Like Ecuador played a certain style where they weren't just banging it to their left winger, they were playing through midfield, whereas Ukraine were hitting those long balls, and that's why he got caught out.
Well, but I guess my point is, though, against Ukraine, it's not as though they targeted Sergiño Dest and beat him every single time.
True, yeah.
So I guess that's what I mean, is I feel like that one moment is maybe looming large in the memory, whereas other than that, I felt like what we saw from him against Diego Lainez from Mexico is what we saw a lot in this tournament, was hassling attacking players without necessarily conceding fouls. Yes, he concedes some, everybody does. But
so when the ball's on the floor and a left winger is dribbling at him, you have faith in Sergiño Dest to come out with that ball, because I do as well.
I do. I also have faith in him to close 5 and 10 yard gaps, but without fouling, but still manage to cause enough problem that the defender or the attacker takes a heavy touch and plays it out of bounds.
Yeah.
So I thought he did a really, really good job at his positioning and that kind of tenacity, which I would like to see from a U.S. right back. So I don't know.
Also very dangerous going forward. He loves a sort of, I'm running at full pace. Not really. Here's my full pace surge and a couple of step overs, and can drive inside and can hit a cross.
Can hit a shot.
As we learned against Nigeria or Qatar. France. Oh, beautiful. Okay, so again, thought experiment, same question. You replaced Nick Lima with Sergiño Dest in this most recent game. Do you get an improvement or not?
No, you don't.
I agree with you.
I thought Nick Lima was good at what he did. He just didn't do the central midfield role that we've come to expect. So I think that was slightly strange. But once you then go back and see it as he's just a standard right back in a 4-4-2 or whatever the heck it was at different times, I thought he was fine. I thought he got forward. I thought he did his defensive job. I thought he fought for balls. I thought he won stuff. Nick Lima is probably another positive, strange as it is to say.
Okay, so back to the U20s. I think it's worth thinking about quarterfinals. We're out. It's over. It's disappointing, etc.
Yeah.
But there are some players who had good tournaments. We talked about Tim Weah. I think PSG will feel a bit better about him after this, or maybe some other team that might take him on loan has taken interest. Sergiño Dest hasn't hurt his chances of getting more minutes with Ajax by this performance here, right?
He is not.
Chris Gloucester with Hanover getting relegated, I think his stock might be up with Hanover. I don't like doing stock up, stock down in terms of how we feel about players, but I think their club situation and their professional situation, I think, is what can really be improved by the U20 World Cup performances.
I have a hard time with that, to be honest, because I saw some people making the point that Sebastian Soto is in contract negotiations with Hanover, so whether or not he stays, scoring 2 goals in this tournament, that's going to turn some heads. I don't know if it will. I know there's lots of people scouting these games. And Soto scored goals, and that's what you got to do as a forward. But it's not necessarily as though he took those chances and beat a defender and made something out of nothing. He scored some poachers' goals, and that's good. Yeah. I don't know if Hanover are going to look at that and be like, we got to lock this kid down long term.
Yeah, it's more like he's good at running in behind. He times his runs very well, and he seems to have a knack for finishing. But there's a lot missing in his game.
Yeah, so
if I was negotiating a contract with him, I'd be like, all right, we'll pay you an extra $10,000 a week, but you got to learn to hold the ball up.
Yeah, exactly. So I think he certainly didn't hurt his chances of getting more minutes with Hanover or getting more looks from another team. I don't quite go the route that I've seen some people go of he's going to get paid now from Hanover. It's well, first of all, Hanover are probably not going to be a team that's going to be paying too much.
Yeah.
But also, I'm not sure that he does.
All right.
But yeah, Chris Gloucester, I'm with you though. I think he did enough to maybe make Hanover think he could start at left back for us. And
or at least we could blood him next year. We can just drop him in and give him a go. I'm sure they've got a left back. That they're somewhat happy with. I guess they're relegated, so maybe not.
Sure.
Okay. I mean, what else? Maybe Tab Ramos. Do we think Tab Ramos gets another cycle? Does he even want another cycle?
I don't know. You'll have to ask him that.
Yeah.
I have mixed emotions about Tab Ramos. We've interacted with him before. He's a very nice fella.
Yeah.
I have some concerns about the way he constructed this roster. I would say notably that when Ayo Akinyola goes home with injury, he brings in Julian Araujo.
Yeah.
Araujo Cerrillo did not play at all.
McKenzie came injured and never looked fit.
Matt Real played the very first game and I don't believe played again, or if he did, he only played as a substitute. So 4 players right there in a 21-player roster who either didn't play or were injured or didn't seem like they were kind of the standard required.
And without being too harsh, Bubakar Keita, Richmond Kickers lone player, so we're a little familiar with him and kind of have fun feelings for him, did not have a great game against Ecuador by some distance. There's an argument that if McKenzie had been fit, if you take in a different centre back who was fit, then that player could have played instead of Boubacar Keita.
Because Boubacar, he still had the distribution issues that we've kind of seen from him in this tournament. He had a few giveaways. He had a few questionable choices when on the ball. And yeah, it does make you wonder, given the consistency of those mistakes, would a center back who was fully fit have replaced him in this game?
And then there's a question of Serrero. You hinted at it earlier, but it's just a defensive midfielder who starts in Major League Soccer, who was on this roster and didn't play 1 second in this tournament.
Including when Chris Durkin was suspended against France. And Brandon Servagna starts as a number 6, even though he's not a number 6.
Yeah.
And it felt like that was in order to get more kind of ball-playing midfielders involved in there so that you don't quite go so defensive. But again, I guess that to me seems like you're kind of changing your entire approach. It doesn't seem as logical as I would have liked it to be, and it also means that you've brought, of the players that we just listed who weren't fit, I believe, or who didn't play, I believe
there's also Ledesma and Ulysses Yanez, who both came into the tournament not fully fit as well.
But in terms of the ones who got very few minutes or were carrying injuries to the extent that they couldn't play, 4 of them are defenders, and or all 4 of them are defenders. Yes, Yanez and Ledesma, but they still played. And I guess I only say that to say that when the United States is chasing near the end and really needed something, I like having Justin Rennicks and Julianez come on. That's great, but was that enough? We probably could have used some more attacking options.
Okay. Bear in mind it's only a 21-player roster, so
that's what I'm saying.
You're slightly limited, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then...
But do you see how that makes my point? Because then why bring 4 players who either don't play or aren't fit enough to play?
Yes, I understand.
All of whom are defenders?
So it's almost like you have fewer players, so you should maximize your roster.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so here's my take on Tab Ramos, which I think I've shared on the show before, which is I think he's very good, maybe as the technical director, and building a culture around the U20 team that all the players seem to buy into. I still don't fully trust him in terms of roster construction, as you just talked about, and just in-game management.
Yeah.
I would argue that, say, in this Ecuador game, Mendes was having a terrible second half and should have been subbed out for Ledesma way, way, way earlier. I think it came in the 60th or maybe 70th minute. It should have been half-time or 55th.
Yeah. It's the fickle nature of the soccer gods that there's a chance that, say, Ecuador go to the final. Don't even win, but go to the final.
Yeah.
Then the narrative to this tournament is the United States lost to an eventual finalist and along the way knocked out France and made it out of their group and made it to the quarterfinals. That's all good. Or maybe Ecuador don't, and you flip that around and you say the United States were once again eliminated in the quarterfinals after somehow getting past France through kind of fluke moments as opposed to a team performance, barely getting past Qatar and losing to Ukraine.
So in terms of the actual tournament performance, it's a loss to Ukraine because probably the wrong lineup selection, like Tim Weah at centre forward and all that just didn't work at all, right? It's a really good win over Nigeria. That's the highlight of the tournament in many ways for me. It's a not convincing win over Qatar at all. It's a lucky win against France. It really is, right? We easily could have lost that game.
100%.
Yeah. And then it's a defeat to Ecuador.
We've talked about this many times, but I'll say it again. It was not as though Tab Ramos... it's really confusing because he brings on Justin Rennicks, for example. Justin Rennicks scores the go-ahead goal against France.
Yeah.
So that you could see that as a positive substitution. But that's him being scrappy and getting on the end of a spilled ball from the goalkeeper. It wasn't as though
the desk shot, right?
Yes, exactly. It was not necessarily like the U.S. bringing on these attacking subs and changing the formation and overloading one side and kind of probing vulnerabilities and then exploiting those vulnerabilities. It felt a bit more like it's time for an attacking sub and you're an attacker, so you go play. That's definitely oversimplifying.
Rennicks for Ledesma? I think that was the substitution.
I think so. And Yanez for, I would assume, Conrad de la Fuente.
Yeah.
But yeah, again, those sort of substitutions feel a bit more rote than they do on the fly reacting to what the other team is doing. Okay.
Anything else to say on the U20s before we wrap this up? Because we've got a lot more to talk about. We've got a second show to record today.
We sure do. So I'll just say no.
Okay. So, US men's national team, we'll be back with more before the Guyana game. Well, I'm sure we'll have some thoughts. I'm sure there'll be some news. The U20s, this team no longer exists. I think that's the thing worth talking about, right? We've thought about this team. We've watched them in the CONCACAF Championship. We've watched them through this tournament. It now gets broken apart and never exists again.
Yes.
Unless some pieces come back together for the U23s.
All right, I'm gonna take a stand here. I'm gonna be uncomfortable, and I'm gonna say, thinking about the next U20 team, and I put myself in a position of
2021 World Cup.
Sure, and thinking about here's your new U20 squad and some U17s coming up, and Conrad de la Fuente is still there. Tab Ramos is in charge. That bums me out.
It does.
So yeah, I think so. So I think to your initial question, I think I would rather see Tab Ramos go to more of a technical director role.
Yeah.
I would rather see somebody else come in to change it up because and that is what top tier teams do. If you consistently get knocked out in the quarterfinals of tournaments then if you want to increase that level, you can't keep doing the same thing and hoping it changes.
We may regret. So I think I'm with you just because I'm almost like I'm just ready for a change.
Yeah,
but I think
that's where I am with it. That's what I mean when I say I'd be disappointed.
Isn't the US record of going to the quarterfinals so many times in a row the best in the world? I think we've got like the most quarterfinal finishes of like consistent quarterfinals.
So we're the best at getting knocked out in the quarterfinals.
Yes, yeah.
Is that what we want to be?
Like,
Is that our
for
goal?
example, England won it in 2017, right? Didn't qualify this time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of teams with like spotty records like that, and we've just got this consistent quarterfinal finish. And I wonder if we might look back at that after we make a change and be like, oh, we used to make the quarterfinals all the time and now we're out in the group stage.
Let me put you on the spot then. Yeah. I'm going to require a direct answer to this one. Do you think the United States should have gone farther than the quarterfinals in this tournament?
Yes.
There's my answer. That's why I say it then. Yeah, I agree. And I think that was...
We should have won the group for one thing.
Yeah. And so I do think that I look on it as more of they made it to the quarterfinals, but it still to me is ultimately a disappointing result.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's a good point to closing it then. So I will just say, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about all kinds of US national teams today.
Tab Ramos, I'm sorry Daryl wants you fired, and right back at you, buddy.
I never said that. Listeners, thank you for listening. I want him promoted to full-time, just technical director. Thank you for listening.
Full-time Tab.
And we'll talk to you again soon.